Are you seriously handing in that faded Navy mechanic's ID while the flag rope clicks in the cold light? They scoffed as the scanner pressed its sharp little chime, a sound cutting straight through the morning hush. But when the worn plastic caught a thin strip of November sun, the metal threading inside it glimmered once, and even the room's silence seemed to hold its heartbeat still. Still quiet. Men leave echoes too. Let me take you back to the dock, where he simply stood and didn't answer. The morning light slid across the tin roof of the Pine Grove post office loading dock, thin and angled like something quietly remembering its way back. A mail truck beeped as it eased into place, the reverse lights flickering against stacks of worn canvas totes. Inside, the smell of cardboard floor wax and old winter coats settled into the slow rhythm the town kept in late November. Art Malden stepped onto the dock's shoulders, straight breath misting in the cool air. 63 years old, retired Navy chief machinist's mate, he moved with the steady tempo of someone who still respected mornings. He slipped a small, dark wallet from his jacket fingers, brushing over a plastic card softened by decades of handling. Linda looked up from the clipboard. "Name, Arthur Malden," he said. "Here for the coverage shift. ID," she asked. He handed it over without ceremony. The moment the plastic touched her fingers, the young clerk beside her snorted. "Oh man, this ID looks older than my dad. Where'd you print this? A cosplay booth?" A few people waiting in line turned their heads. Someone let out a muffled laugh. Linda held the card at arm's length, tilting it against the light as if it were some kind of novelty coaster. "You think anyone's going to buy this?" she said. "It doesn't match anything in our system." Art didn't flinch. The card showed a much younger face, sharper around the jaw, but the eyes were the same steady gray. The corner had a small crease. The Navy emblem had faded to a soft bronze. He'd kept it because it was the last ID issued before his final tour, the one he hadn't talked much about. Tommy Ruiz, the part-timer, barely past 20, paused mid-step on the ramp. He had been carrying a tray of small parcels, but the laughter made him look over. The old card caught the light just long enough for him to notice the thin metallic threading that wasn't part of novelty IDs. He drew a slow breath. "That's real old Navy format," Tommy murmured. Linda waved a dismissive hand. "Come on, kid. This could be anything. It barely scans." Art's fingers rested calmly against the railing. "If it's a problem, ma'am, I can step aside." His voice was low, deliberate, easy as a porch swing creaking at dusk. The clerk chuckled again. "Nah, man, this is hilarious. I've never seen something this outdated." Tommy shifted the tray in his arms. "I believe him," he said softly. Linda looked between them. "Look, rules are rules. I can't log you in with something that doesn't match our system. We're prepping for the Thanksgiving routes." "I can't have errors today." Art nodded once, a small gesture of acceptance. He didn't push back, didn't argue, didn't even sigh. He simply stood there, letting the cold morning settle around him, while a couple of customers murmured behind the rope line. Tommy stepped a little closer. "Sir, don't worry. I know the older Navy cards. They're just different." Art offered the faintest smile, quiet and worn at the edges. "Thank you," he said. The loading dock fell into a stillness that made the hum of the mail truck seem louder. Someone dropped a bundle of envelopes. The sound echoed lightly. The morning kept moving, but something in the air held its breath, waiting, as if the day had just opened a door it didn't realize was there. Tommy swallowed. "I trust you," he whispered again. The laughter from a minute earlier hung in the air like dust in the sunlight, drifting, but not yet gone. The side office off the loading dock was a narrow room with humming fluorescent lights and a metal desk that had seen too many winters. The scanner on the counter clicked and whined with each package, each barcode passing beneath its glass, like the day was trying to keep time with itself. Papers rustled. A heater in the corner rattled without providing warmth. Linda typed briskly, jaw set. Art stood a few feet back, hands loosely folded, letting the cold light flatten the edges of his shadow on the floor. Tommy lingered by the doorway, pretending to sort parcels, but really watching every movement inside the cramped room. "All right," Linda said, sliding the Old Navy ID under the card reader again. "Let's see if it picks up anything this time." The machine blinked once, twice, and then gave a low chime. No record found the screen displayed. Linda exhaled sharply. Great, just great. She tried again, this time manually entering the serial sequence. Her fingers tapped the keys. The numbers faded on the card, forcing her to squint. She hit enter. No record found. She leaned back, folding her arms. ID. That key mehi thungkum nyan. This isn't even pulling up a partial match. Art didn't move. He just stood there, coat zipped to the collar, eyes steady. The quiet around him made the fluorescent buzz seem louder. Tommy cleared his throat. Sometimes the legacy cards, Linda cut him off. Legacy doesn't mean invisible. If this were real, the database would at least show a retired profile. She lifted the card closer to the light. The plastic had softened at the corners. The embossed lettering, once crisp, had thinned. A crease ran diagonally across the photo, like a memory bent too many times. The Navy emblem, once a bright seal, had faded to a gentle bronze shadow. "This is really old," she muttered. One of the younger clerks walked by carrying a crate of mailers. He glanced at the ID and chuckled under his breath. Navy hasn't used that card style in what, forever? You can buy stuff like that online. He didn't mean it cruelly, but the words landed anyway. Another misunderstanding stacked on top of the first. Linda turned the card over again. If he bought it, it wasn't a good investment. Art only nodded, as if the comment were a passing breeze rather than a sting. He kept his gaze on the floor, one foot slightly shifted back posture, calm, almost anchored. A man used to waiting out storms. Tommy set the parcels down and stepped in a little closer. "Ma'am, those older Navy IDs don't always scan. My uncle had one from the early 90s. Half the systems didn't recognize it." "That's not the point," Linda said. "We're prepping for Thanksgiving routes. I don't have time for documents that don't validate." The scanner beeped again somewhere behind her. A phone buzzed. The heater coughed out a half-hearted sigh. Art finally spoke, voice soft. "If it complicates the morning, I can step aside. No trouble meant." Linda glanced up at him. Something in his tone, steady without defense, made her hesitate for the briefest moment, but she pushed past it. "We can't move forward until we verify your information," she said. "Please wait outside." Tommy watched the exchange tension settling in his shoulders. He'd spent enough time around veterans at outreach events to recognize what others missed. The quiet in Art's eyes wasn't evasive. It was history. As Art turned to leave, Tommy's gaze followed him, worried. He knew this wasn't just a system error. This was a misunderstanding, gaining momentum, one scan at a time. The noon sun hit the Pine Grove loading dock at a sharper angle, turning the stacks of parcels into bright rectangles and long shadows. The place had shifted from its slow morning hum to a midday scramble. Rollers squeaking, pallets thumping into place, the air filled with the scent of dust cardboard and the faint sweetness of someone's forgotten apple cider. Art moved carefully through the narrow aisles of packages, keeping to the edges the way seasoned mechanics kept to the edges of engine rooms. His steps were measured, patient. He knew how to let chaos rush around him without letting it land. A pallet stacked with Thanksgiving parcels stood near the ramp, loaded just a bit off balance. It leaned not dangerously, not in any way that might hurt someone, just enough to suggest a shift in weight, the kind of misalignment that came more from angle than threat. Linda spotted it at the same time she spotted Art. "Sir," she called out, voice clipped, "you're standing in the wrong place again." Art paused, looking at the pallet, then at her. "Sorry," he said simply. "Didn't mean to be in the way." The young clerk who had stacked it earlier froze, color rising in his cheeks. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out, just a nervous breath. Art saw that. He stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on the frame of the pallet, stabilizing it with the calm assurance of someone who had spent a lifetime fixing things that were more complicated than this. "That was on me," Art said. "The kid's still learning the floor. Let me take responsibility." Linda frowned. "You're not helping by covering for him. If that pallet had slipped, it didn't." Art replied, tone still gentle. "We're fine." The young clerk exhaled in relief, shoulders dropping. He shot Art a grateful look before hurrying off to grab another shipment tag. Tommy had been organizing bubble mailers nearby, but he'd heard every word. He stepped closer, eyes following the scene, the half-leaning pallet, the young worker's embarrassment, Art's quiet acceptance. "Ma'am, Tommy said it wasn't his fault." Linda pressed her lips into a thin line. "You all need to stay in designated areas. I don't want accidents before the holiday." But Tommy wasn't listening to her anymore. His gaze traveled to the side office window where the old Navy ID card lay on top of a stack of forms set apart like an object waiting for judgment. The fluorescent light from inside washed over it, making the faded emblem seem even more unreal. Tommy swallowed. "If he were pretending," he said under his breath, "why is he like that? Why cover for someone else?" Linda didn't answer. Art adjusted the pallet with a small shift of weight, turning it just enough so it rested squarely on its base. The motion was subtle, instinctive, the kind of thing someone did after years of reading pressure angle and balance, not just in machinery, but in people. "You should let me know if that one needs restacking," he said. "Happy to help." Then he stepped back, letting the noise of the dock fill the space again. Tommy's eyes drifted once more to the ID card lying off to the side, quiet, unmoving, waiting. The way it sat there made the misunderstanding feel heavier than the pallet itself, as if the card were carrying a weight no one else could see yet. The late afternoon light washed the Pine Grove post office loading dock in a soft amber glow. The kind that made the concrete look gentler than it ever felt. The day had stretched itself thin, leaving the workers a little hurried, a little tired, and more prone to glancing at the clock than at the tasks in front of them. A mail truck eased toward the ramp, its front tire catching the tight inner angle where the concrete dipped. The truck didn't crash or jolt, it simply wedged itself at the wrong tilt, pinned by geometry rather than danger. The driver tried to correct it, but the angle held firm, the engine humming in place. "What do I do?" the driver called, flustered. "I can't pull out of it." Linda moved toward the truck, hands up in a half-panicked gesture. Stop trying to force it. You'll make it worse." A few clerks gathered, murmuring. Someone suggested calling maintenance. Someone else mentioned a tow. The tension grew, hanging in the cooling air like a thin wire ready to snap. Art stepped forward from the edge of the group, calm settling around him like an old coat he'd worn for years. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked. The driver blinked. Sure." Art crouched down, studying the wheel, the dip in the ramp, the angle of the axle. His fingers brushed lightly across the concrete, feeling the grain, the balance point. He stood dusting off his hands. "Keep the RPM steady," he said, voice low and sure. "Turn the wheel left, just a hair." Then ease back half a notch. The driver followed the instructions. For a second, nothing happened. Then the truck shifted. Not violently, just enough for the geometry to release its hold. The wheel straightened. The engine found its path. The truck rolled free. A collective breath left the group relief, sweeping across the dock like a breeze. "Thank God," someone whispered. Linda pressed a hand to her chest. "How did you even see that old habits?" Art said. "I've worked with tighter spaces." A door opened near the back of the lot. A woman in navy khakis stepped out, adjusting the sleeve of her coat. Commander Rebecca Hayes had arrived for the Veterans Outreach visit scheduled that evening. Her stride was crisp, purposeful, the kind of walk that made people straighten without realizing it. She approached the group just as Art was leaning down again to check the tire track. His wallet slipped from his jacket pocket, landing softly on the concrete. The old Navy ID card slid out, catching the last thread of sunlight. Commander Hayes stepped right onto the moment. She looked down, stopped, then slowly bent to pick up the card. The air around them stilled, as if the loading dock itself held its breath. She turned the card over, reading each line, the faded seal, the soft edges worn by time, and hands that had kept it through years most people never asked about. "Art Malden," she said, voice almost breaking. "Chief Machinist's Mate, USS Garrison. My God, this is real." She didn't move. She didn't blink. She froze completely, totally, as though recognition itself had turned the world silent. Tommy broke the stillness with a shout that cracked through the air. "I knew he was telling the truth," he yelled. And for a moment, Pine Grove's busy loading dock stood in reverent quiet, the fading sun turning the old ID in Commander Hayes' hand into a small glowing piece of history. The commotion slowly spilled into the front lobby of the Pine Grove post office, where the late-day light spread itself across rows of metal P.O. boxes and bulletin boards filled with holiday flyers. People who had witnessed the scene outside drifted in, still murmuring, still replaying the moment the truck unstuck itself, and the moment the commander had gone, still holding a faded Navy ID like it was a relic. Art stood near the counter, hands folded, gaze lowered, in the same quiet way he had held himself all day. Tommy hovered beside him, almost like a guard who wasn't sure how close he was allowed to stand. Linda entered last. Her steps were slow, careful. She stopped a few feet from Art, clutching the clipboard against her chest. Her voice, usually crisp with instructions and deadlines, wavered slightly. She swallowed. "I laughed at you, at your ID. I said it was fake." She met his eyes, and the admission cracked something open in her tone. And it was real. All along. Art gave a small shake of his head. "You were doing your job." "No." Linda said more firmly than before. "I wasn't. I was assuming." A few customers lingered by the walls, the kind who never looked away from a story once it had started telling itself. Their quiet attention filled the room. Commander Hayes stepped forward, the old ID card still in her hand. She straightened her posture, but her expression was softer now, touched with recognition and something like reverence. "For everyone here," she said, raising the card slightly. "This is an older generation Navy identification. These were issued before the database standardization. Only real service members carried them, and very few still have theirs intact." She glanced toward Art, then back at the small crowd. "This one is authentic. Completely." A ripple went through the room. Not dramatic, but deep. Someone near the P.O. boxes exhaled shakily. "We judged him wrong," they said. "We were way off." A couple behind them nodded, their earlier whispers drying into silence. Commander Hayes took a cloth from her pocket standard issue, the kind used for lenses and screens, and gently wiped the surface of Art's ID, removing the dust from where it had landed on the concrete. The action was slow, almost ceremonial. When she finished, she stepped in front of him and held it out with both hands. "Chief Malden," she said softly, "this belongs with you." Art hesitated, surprised by the gesture. Then he reached out, accepting the card with the same steady gentleness that had carried him through the day. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. "Yes," she replied. "I did." Linda pressed a hand to her forehead, the noise of the lobby blurring behind her. "I shouldn't have treated you the way I did," she said. "I'm sorry, truly." Art offered her a quiet nod. "It's all right." Tommy stepped forward, his voice breaking the hush. "I told you," he said to the room, "more than anyone, he was the real deal." Someone in line added almost under their breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "We were wrong. Really wrong." The crowd stood in a thoughtful stillness, letting the truth settle like dust in warm light. The old ID card rested in Art's hands once more. No longer questioned, no longer doubted, just quietly returned to where it belonged. 1 week later, the Pine Grove post office lobby looked almost festive in the late afternoon light. The holiday flyers had been straightened, the bulletin board cleared of clutter, and a small crowd formed in a loose half-circle near the wall by the P.O. boxes. A new plaque hung there, its brass plate catching the gold of the sunset that streamed through the glass doors. Art Malden stood a few steps back, cap in hand, as if giving the moment space to unfold without him pushing it forward. Tommy was the first to speak. "They finished it last night," he said almost proudly. Commander Hayes made sure the wording was right. Art didn't answer immediately. His gaze traveled over the edges of the plaque, the careful engraving, the polished screws that held it to the wall. He read the inscription slowly, the way someone reads something meant to outlast them. We once laughed at his old Navy mechanic's ID. A commander froze first, then we listened. A soft murmur passed through the room. A couple of regulars from the morning mail line stood shoulder to shoulder near the bulletin board, hats in hand. One elderly woman dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue. Tommy held out an envelope. "There's something else," he said. "Commander Hayes asked me to give it to you." She had to get back to base, but she wanted this here today. Art took the envelope, the paper warm from Tommy's hand. He opened it carefully. A folded note slipped out, written in neat handwriting that still carried the shape of Navy training, precise even under emotion. He unfolded it. "Dear Mr. Malden, they laughed at your ID, but I'll always remember how our commander froze. That's how I know you're real. Tommy." The words held stillness, the kind that traveled deeper than sound. Art read them twice, then pressed the letter gently back into the envelope. Tommy shifted on his feet. "I hope that's okay. I wanted you to know what it meant to me." Art rested a steady hand on the young man's shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It means more than you think." The lobby doors opened, letting in a breeze of cold November air, and a couple of townspeople who paused when they saw the gathering. One by one they approached Art, not loudly, not ceremonially, but with the shy sincerity small towns saved for when words were hard to find. A man from the hardware store stepped forward first. "Thank you," he said simply, reaching out his hand. Then a woman from the bakery. "We got it wrong," she whispered as she shook his hand. A teenager Art didn't recognize. "Sir, I'm sorry for how folks treated you." Hand after hand found his some firm, some unsteady, all carrying the same message without needing to say it twice. The plaque gleamed above them, echoing the story that had reshaped the lobby, the staff, and something in the town itself. Art looked back at the inscription once more. The sunlight caught the words Old Navy Mechanics ID, and Commander froze, turning them bright for a moment before the day began to dim. He slipped Tommy's letter into his coat pocket, standing quietly as the crowd eased around him. Outside, the sky was sliding into evening warm gold, fading to blue. Inside, a small community stood gathered around a man they had misjudged, now seeing him clearly in the soft light. Art let the moment settle, unhurried, grateful. If this story moved you, share it forward. The late November sun drifted through the post office windows as Art stood before the new plaque, its brass surface catching the day's last gold, while townspeople paused in the quiet hum of closing time. Still the words carved there about the Old Navy Mechanics ID, and the commander who froze felt less like a correction and more like a lamp in a winter window, reminding everyone how easily judgment can tilt the wrong way. Then Tommy handed him the folded note again, saying he wanted Art to keep it close, and the simple truth inside it carried the weight of a promise. Quietly, Art touched the plaque, letting the moment settle the way, steady and settle a shifting engine. And as neighbors lined up to shake his hand, he left the day with a soft replay in his chest. They listened because the truth stood still.